A lot of people just aren't ready for this video, but I just don't care at this point. Hi everyone, my name is Vina, aka Miss WC Reader, and welcome back to my channel. So this video has been a long time coming. It's a topic I am very vocal about on my Twitter. It's a topic I've been vocal about on my blog a couple of times, and it's a topic I don't see going away, and some of y'all are playing out here on these internet streets, and I'm not here for the blatant disrespect anymore. So today we're going to discuss why the online book community is so disrespectful when it comes to Black romance. Y'all don't bring the same energy when it comes to white romance, but every time we turn around, you guys are like, I love Black romance. Meanwhile, every book that you're suggesting has a white male blatantly on the cover. Or you can't relate to Black romance despite you being Black yourself and coming from a loving Black family. But okay, monster smut. This is a fairy with a dick and a vampire fucking. They're so much more relatable to you than two Black people falling in love. Or you want to categorize all Black romance as street books or hoodlit. And one, not all hoodlit is romance, so you need to go reevaluate the books you're reading. Not even all of those stories with a romantic relationship in it are even what the author considers romance. And all of those stereotypes don't necessarily apply to Black romance. So you need to expand your reading. And then whenever we try to have this discussion, I've noticed there's always some people who come running claiming that you are trying to disrespect their relationship or disrespect their parents' relationship or blah, 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 blah. I don't care about giving you a disclaimer or your feelings at this point, because it's those same people who have no problem blatantly disrespecting Black romance when they talk about how they can't relate or paint us all with the same paintbrush, and I just don't care about your feelings. If you have a problem with Black women discussing their feelings about Black romance, then you need to look deep inside yourself and realize your anti-Blackness, because you are also a product of Black romance, believe it or not. Maybe not immediately, but further down the line. So why do you have such a problem seeing Black people in a loving relationship? And one common complaint that I see from people is that there's no Black romance out there, and that's definitely not true. But some people seem to have a hard time finding Black romance, mostly because they don't want to look. So if you don't want to look wide and low for Black romance, I just want to go down a list of suggested people to follow. This is in no particular order. These are just people who I constantly see talking about different types of Black romance, everything from contemporary to historical to paranormal and erotic, polyamorous. They go over a wide range of Black romance. So if you're struggling, check these people out. I will just go down the list by Twitter. So you can follow Katrina Jackson, who is an independent published author, and she's at Katrina Jax. She is constantly having these important discussions about Black romance as well, and she's such an advocate. At Danny Reads, that's DANIEREADS. She's another one who is very vocal about Black romance, and she has no problem giving you suggestions if you need one. Following her page, you'll see her talking about a lot of great stuff. At BBR Reviews, Sharonda, she has been reading Black romance forever. She can tell you so much about both traditionally published and indie published romance. She has a TikTok page. She's done some booktube stuff. She has a podcast. She just overall is a huge advocate for Black romance. She's never not mentioning new stories on her page. So following her, there's always something you can find. Taima at Shades and Pages. That's Shades, the letter N, and then Pages. She is another great resource for Black romance. Also does some podcast work, has done some YouTube work, and it's just, has a popular Bookstagram page where she pairs books with different lipsticks, which is really unique and cool idea that I like. Reese Ryan, who is a Black author, specifically she does traditionally published, however she has been doing more independent press work lately, and she's done a lot of stuff with Harlequin. She's doing a little bit of stuff too with Forever Publishing now, and her handle is at Reese Ryan Writes. She also has a page here on YouTube where she interviews authors and has great author discussions. At _ Nicole Falls. Nicole Falls is another author who is on my list of authors I need to check out. She's also very vocal, and she is definitely one who has been telling us we need to have these conversations not just in the DMs, but on the regular timeline, and people need to hear it, whether it hurts their feelings or not. At Rilzy Writes, which is author Rilzy Adams. I just started reading her recently. She is a Caribbean author based in Antigua, and I really love her erotic romance. I read 8, which was just a quick, fun novelette recently, and that just gave me all the feels. It was exactly what I needed while I was up for 2 hours, like editing a video. It was very hot, and everything managed to be different. At Life Wit Me, which is Whitney. She is another great blogger who is very vocal about Black romance. At Who Picked This Book, Nicole, she reads a lot of romance. That's specific. She's a romance booktuber who's always trying out different stories, and she's always looking for like a lot of the obscure stuff too. So if you are looking for a particular type of romance, she's probably read at least one Black book that had that particular type, and she is so open about reading different types of romance that you can just check out her page as well and find some good suggestions. I know she had some good vampire ones recently. And then at Tasha L Harrison, who is another great independent published author, also very, very vocal about Black romance. And she has some small town, like indie published Black romance that I'm very interested and looking forward to. Also, I highly suggest checking out the channel Now That's Black Love, which is run by Deidre and Ashley, and they had some great discussions earlier this year. While they're on hiatus right now, check out their discussion where they talk about the origins of Black romance, because they really just talk about all the history behind it, specifically in traditional publishing. Like, for those of y'all who don't know, back in the 90s when we were seeing more Black romance published, a lot of it was coming from the Arabesque imprint, which was created by Kensington in July of 1994, and it changed hands a couple of times, including to BET and Harlequin. Harlequin had it as under their Kamani Press imprint for a number of years, and with the last titles being released in 2019, and the sad part about Money Romance and its demise is that there are a lot of talented authors, and there are a lot of great authors in the backlist who just did not get the respect they did and the marketing that they deserved. Many of us have access to Hoopla, and particularly at least on my version of Hoopla, a lot of titles are on there, so you can go back and check it out and find things you like. Harlequin is mostly known for their category romance. So if you want high heat billionaire romance, you go to Desire. If you want these books that also have rich members set in these fabulous locations, you might go to Presents. If you want romantic suspense, you will go to Harlequin Intrigue or Harlequin Suspense, depending on how much suspense versus romance you want in the story. They have Christian romance with their inspirational line. They have kind of like lighthearted, more like hometown, small town type of romance in Harlequin Special Edition. So they have a lot of different categories to choose from to help you narrow down your reading taste. And that's one thing that was missing from Kamani too, which also did not help. So all your other books are in categories, but you just decided Black is a category and you're throwing all your authors within the same category. So the readers are going into a book and you don't know if you're picking up a high heat romance with sex in the first chapter, or if you are picking up a more lighthearted romance where they might have a fade to black way later in the book, like maybe like after the 60% mark or something. And that was actually something I found challenging when I was getting back into reading because I wanted to check their titles. But like all the ones I was picking up because I didn't know anything about the line were like instantly high heat right off the bat. And that's not necessarily what I was looking into. For the most part, prefer my romance to have a stronger connection before we just jump into sex right away. That's not everybody's taste, but that is my taste. So some of the stories that I had picked up didn't vibe with me. So I'm like, do I even like their types of stories? Because it seems like they're all these, and that actually wasn't true. And I've since read a lot more and done my research and realized, no, they have all different types in there and all different types of authors. It just depends on what you're into. And like I said, because they weren't marketed, a lot of these books were overlooked, and they also weren't placed in a place where you could easily find them. And that was a problem. But going through Hoopla, I've been able to discover so many of those backlist authors. Also, one thing I've noticed too is even after the end of Monty, if you look at the books being published by traditional publishing, the majority of Black romance by far is still with Harlequin. And that's a problem because you have so many of these publishers promising that they care about diversity and they're going to have more romance from Black authors. And then you look and the Black romance is still mostly the category romance from Harlequin. And yes, the Harlequin ones are better now because the authors are getting to be into the categories that they deserve, and they are getting those spaces on the shelves, and they are getting more promotion. However, it's still category romance, so it has a page length, different requirements on things they have to hit for the story, depending on the line, and then they actually cycle out faster. Category romance does not stay on the shelves very long. It has a quick shelf life, and then once it's gone, it's harder to acquire unless you're looking for used books, and even then, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. So why are the majority of our Black romance stories still category romance with a short shelf life? That's the question that I have for publishing. When we talk about Black romance, we do need to start at the publisher level. So what I noticed, especially within the past year, is so many publishers talk about how they're committed to diverse stories and are committed to Black lives. But how are you committed to Black lives if you don't care about Black stories and Black community? so often they are acquiring interracial romance that all reads very similarly, and it's usually interracial romance with a white love interest, because that white love interest being in the story keeps them comfortable in their element. When they're reading stories with those white love interests, usually that white love interest is a POV character. More often than not, race is not mentioned at all. I'm not talking about racism, although I don't understand how racism will never come up in the conversation. And then sometimes these books kind of want to play on racism, where they'll have like this evil white lady character, and I'm like, y'all know his mama is white. And sometimes the character will even be his mama too. So I'm like, so we're just not going to have a discussion about his white mama's racist tendencies with him? Nope, we're not going to have that discussion. Okay. I mean, I don't know where y'all think these white men come from, or that they would never have any of the same views as their white mothers. But that's just something I've noticed. They're often a POV character. Race is often ignored. And when I say race is ignored, it's not even just like that they're black and white. Like with the black women, they'll often ignore anything remotely resembling blackness. Like you won't hear her like have any type of traditions that could be associated with only black people. She'll often just be described as having brown skin and curly hair. And I know people would describe me as having brown skin and curly hair. And I mean, I don't have curly hair today, but normally my hair is a more kinky type of curl. They're just saying curly, which gives me like a 3A type of wavy curly hair type of picture. Or yes, wavy is also a word that they'll use a lot. So I'm just like, these black women don't really look like me, but I'm being told by publishing, here is your representation. So that is another problem with some of these stories. Like, why is your black character only black because of her hair and skin? Why does she shy away from anything that could be remotely considered black? Like, we're lucky if we get her family in the story. Very rarely will she use any black vernacular, and by black vernacular that could be AAVE, that could be Jamaican slang, that could be British slang. It's just missing from these stories. Some of those little quirks, like, you know how we all get on Twitter and we talk about how black people live the same lives because we'll do things or we'll have certain practices that other people that will find out thousands of other people practice as well. Those little things are always missing from these stories. So when we talk about wanting to see more diversity on page, that also needs to be considered. And that is just another reason why we need black people working in those positions in publishing to acquire stories, in both the editor seat as well as working in marketing. I'm so tired of people saying that black romance doesn't sell. It doesn't sell a lot because y'all never want to promote it. That's just it. Look at how it sold when 7 Days in June was promoted. That is the only black romance I've seen recently that got a huge rollout, and it was worth it. You had critics well before it released talking about how great the story was and how it was one to watch. You had it having major book club release. Most black romance books are not getting those book club releases. However, it's no problem to get a diversity pick that is an interracial romance. Because, oh my gosh, this is so discussion worthy. Two people are a different race and barely talk about it in this book. So how is that really discussion worthy? That's something to think about there. And another thing that I've noticed online is that a lot of people have something to say when Black romance discussions come up, yet they barely read Black romance, if read it at all, or it's authors who don't write it, who want to look down on other people who don't read it or write it. And it's like, why are you even throwing your opinion in here if you don't care about Black romance either? Because earlier this year, the Black Prose Club did a panel during Black History Month on romance. Those of us who normally follow the Black Prose Club know they are very vocal about romance, specifically Black romance. So we were going into that conversation hoping it would be a conversation about Black romance. However, many of the panel members who volunteered are not people who give a crap about Black romance, so there ended up being some crazy and disrespectful things said in that video, which the Black Prose Club fully addressed the next day, having an open and honest discussion. And some of the people who were discussing it on Twitter were putting themselves on a high horse like, see, that's what happens when you let your interracial romance define you. I don't let my interracial relationship define me. And they wanted to talk about how people always disrespect certain images of Black people. Yet, I'm like, look in the mirror. You aren't writing that stuff either. You aren't reading that stuff either. And it's months later and you're still not drafting that stuff. So, were you speaking up for clout? That's what I'm just going to assume at the time. And then when we ask you about Black romance, you kind of dance around it. Like, I was reading this interview on Shondaland because I was doing some research for a picture I wanted to do for them. And it was an interview with Talia Hibbert. And they specifically asked her, why does Black romance matter, especially now, given everything that's going on? Now, mind you, this was an interview from 2020. There were a lot of people who were actively being asked these questions, and there were a lot of people being very vocal about the Black community who otherwise wouldn't be so vocal. And her answer was, I'm in an interracial relationship, which is a huge part of why most of my books have interracial couples, because I have shockingly little imagination for an author, so I just go with what I know. But I feel like if you're trying to celebrate Black life, then surely Black romance is what you want to prioritize. In particular, it seems odd to me that so many people are speaking up for Black men, but promoting my books that have white heroes. I just felt like surely this is a time to be reading about Black men who are underrepresented and an underappreciated demographic in romance. So one, that didn't answer the question. Two, she was clearly trying to be PC and give a safe answer, but my problem with that is, okay, you're in a interracial relationship, you like to write about your type of romance, but do you not have Black family members? Do none of them date Black? Are you not the product of a Black union yourself? Do you not have friends who are in Black relationships? There's no one you can look to for inspiration besides just your immediate relationships. You write shifter romance, but last I checked, you're not any kind of shifter or monster. And you write white romance, despite not being white. So why is it so easy to imagine romance from the white perspective, but it's so hard to imagine two Black people being in love? And if you're trying to celebrate Black life, and celebrating Black life means Black romance, are you celebrating Black life in your stories if you have no Black couples in them? Those are just the questions that I had after reading her article, where she was asked a number of things about Black people in particular, not only within romance, but kind of in the book industry in general. And she kind of played it safe. And it's like, okay, but you are being promoted in Black romance spaces. And when people are looking for Black representation in romance, we're being recommended your books. So why do you have a series with a lot of marketing, a lot more marketing than most Black romance writers get? And all three women are with somebody who is not Black. Why is it so easy to only picture those fictional characters with white men? That's just a question that I had. So, with the success of Bridgerton this year, a lot of y'all have been talking about how y'all want to see more Black historical romance. And one, Bridgerton is not Black historical romance. It's not Black representation, period. It is a white romance series written by a white woman who, when asked, said she does not write Black characters into her stories because she doesn't write struggle. So there you go, helping put money into the pocket of somebody who doesn't even respect you. And those characters were written as white and cast with biracial actors for diversity for Netflix. That still does not make it Black representation. They kind of skirt around race and try to pretend interracial romance resolves all, and we know it doesn't. And again, the books are still the same. It's still very much white romance. These aren't talking about how Black people would have lived during those times. And it's not specifically focusing on how they would have to navigate the society. And even when we do get that in historical romance, because again, Regency has a chokehold on historical romance, and publishers think that's the only thing that people can write about. So they're like, oh, we have your diversity here, and it's a biracial woman who is white passing, trying to squeeze her way into white society, and they're telling those of us who are unambiguously Black and have two Black parents that we're supposed to relate. Well, I'm sorry, I can't relate to fighting to be in a society that doesn't welcome me, but I feel obligated to because that's half of me. That's not my journey, that's some other people's journey, and I'm sure they love it. But for the most part, those stories bore the shit out of me. And I saw this tweet by Katrina Jackson, who has been very vocal about this topic, and she said, there's something very strange about wanting more Black people in historical romance and then asking that it be set in Regency England. Maybe you don't actually want more Black people in historical romance. The imperialist and Eurocentric chokehold on romance is a lot sometimes. And I felt that because I've seen it even recently. There is an upcoming book. It's not a romance, but it has a romance in it. And it is called A More Perfect Union, but it's set during slavery time, and the Black female lead is battling her feelings towards, I believe he's Irish. And I'm like, one, how is that a more perfect union during slave days? And two, why is there this idea that we are still perpetuating that the Irish people, one, weren't involved in slavery, because they definitely were. Not only were they treated better than us, some of them were literally on the plantation in the Caribbean being the overseer to Black people. And there was and back in Ireland, they were making the goods that were being sent to the New World to help feed the plantation owners and overseers, as well as clothe them. And they had their own slave trade going on, if you really want to look into it. Again, that is all research, so this idea that they are somehow better and on the same level of us just doesn't fly for me. Let's stop perpetuating the Irish slave myth, and the idea of a perfect union with a white person during a time where Black people were suffering at the hands of a white person is just too much for me. I avoid those books like the plague because they make me very, very angry. And the sad part is because a lot of people don't pay attention to history. They take these books and then they're like, well, historically this. No, 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 no. Historically, it wasn't like that at all. And you would be best to actually read some people's accurate accounts of how things actually were back then. So, when we're talking about historical romance, why are there not stories being promoted other than the lovely Miss Beverly Jenkins that are set in the past featuring Black couples? Being Black is not all about trauma, so those stories can be told. You don't have to completely ignore what's going on in the world. It's very possible to talk about what's going on with the white people while also showing that Black people had lives outside of how they had to react to racist white people, how they built their own communities. Some of those communities were thriving. Believe it or not, when there were some Black communities where, because they couldn't go and really do stuff in the white communities, all the money stayed within the community, and the people were doing so well because of it. Tulsa, the Greenwood district, was one of those communities, and we see what happened to that. White people couldn't handle Black people living so well amongst their own. And Miss Beverly Jenkins does a great job. She is older, and her writing style is not for everyone. So where are the newer, younger writers who are coming in, who are able to write these types of stories showing Black people in different settings than what we're used to getting? And why is there not more of a variety on the shelves? Like, if you go into the bookstore and you're looking for Black historical romance and you don't necessarily like her writing, then you pretty much can't find anything, and that's very unfair to our Black readers. And when it comes to Black romance, I know we will usually focus on the US because most of the books published are from US publishing, but it is important to also discuss that representation when it comes to non-African American culture as well. So I know we've probably already heard of the book. It was one that I adored because I feel like it's very close to my heart, which is Sweethand by N.G. Peltier. And Sweethand is set in Trinidad and Tobago, which is where my family has ties. And I ended up buying a copy from my aunt, who was very happy because, as she's expressed to me, in the Caribbean, there is not a lot of romance in their literature. So most of the time when she was getting a romance, and even up until she moved to the US, which was, I'd say, more recent, she was only seeing white historical romance. So she didn't really get to see Black people represented in stories like that, and a lot of Caribbean literature is stuff that she considers very traumatizing based on her real life experiences, because there are people trying to deal with difficulties often in stories like abuse and or other things that are happening in society, and that just made her not want to read stories from local authors. So I would love to see more romance set in the Caribbean, and set with people who are of Caribbean descent. Like, there is a book on my TBR from Nadine Gonzalez, which is called What Happens in Miami, and the leads in that story are Afro-Haitian and Afro-Cuban, and we can go on and on and on about how disrespected Haitian people are. So I love seeing positive stories with Haitian leads, and it's important to show that there are Black people who are in love, who are who are from other cultures that aren't just African American. Those stories are important too. There's another story on my TBR that I'm trying to get to in either October or November, and that is this one, which is If I Don't Have You by Sarita Domingo. So I actually ordered this right away when it released last year, because my TBR is so overloaded I haven't really gotten to get to it yet. And it is by a Black British author. I have read books from her in the past that are YA romance, but this will be my first adult romance from her. And her leads are Afro-Brazilian and Black British. It's important to have that type of representation as well, because I have friends in the UK who complain they don't see themselves a lot in literature, and again, it's kind of echoes the complaints that I hear from my Caribbean readers sometimes, where it's like we're only seeing certain narratives portrayed, except for, well, in the Caribbean, the narratives will mostly involve other Black people. I hear a lot of times in the UK that it's often, again, how they deal with white people, which is similar to the problem that we have in the US right now, where we're getting those stories about dealing with white people as if that's all Black people's lives have to them, is dealing with white people. And that's a much larger conversation outside of the Black romance, even though there's definitely intersections there. So I think it's important to uplift these stories. And the nice thing about If I Don't Have You is that it was actually published by a Black indie publisher who now has a distribution deal with a big 5 publisher, so they'll be able to get more of their stories out there. And I just think it's so important to continue to showcase Black romance. I don't want to see any more posts on social media where somebody is asking for Black romance, or somebody feels the need to post, oh, I love all this Black romance, and then all the covers are white people. I was on Bookstagram, and there was this challenge there. I think it was called hashtag brown nipple challenge, and I double checked because I'm like, this author sounds familiar, and I have read a lot of her books in the past. Her name is Nana Malone, and I'm like, when I read her books, they were pretty much all white millionaire / billionaire types of stories, many of them set in the UK. And I glanced, and it still seems to be that's the only type of romance she writes. So I'm like, how are we having a brown nipple challenge? Because even looking through the hashtag, the only brown nipples I was seeing was on one of the love interests. Not even both. It's not like we were promoting a lot of LGBTQ plus stories either, where you have multiple brown nipples on the characters. It was just strictly like you have a Black woman or like a South Asian woman, and yeah, she has the brown nipples, but her love interest is white. So do we actually want diversity, or are we just saying we do? Because diversity doesn't mean just a non-white person with a white person. It means actively acquiring stories about people of all different backgrounds. And part of diverse romance is Black romance. Those stories that are set within the Black community, those stories of Black people triumphing, and it doesn't have to be through super hardship. They can just be regular people in love, and it shouldn't be some kind of marketing gimmick like with Love in Color or in Blackout. Those were heavily marketed as like life-changing stories about Black romance, and I'm like, from a Black romance reader, those stories just aren't that good. Those of y'all who are hyping them to death, I check your pages and y'all don't really even read Black romance like that. So y'all are here talking about, oh my gosh, this story was amazing, this was the best anthology I ever read, and then y'all can't even tell me who your favorite couple was in the book. So was it really that amazing and life-changing? Like, let's not hype stories that just for their intent. That's what the publishers want us to do. See, oh, well, we're making half an effort by publishing these stories where Black love is the focus, but then the stories really aren't that great. It shouldn't be the idea of the story that we're praising the story for. It should be because there are solid, memorable characters with a great storyline. And that's what I want to see more of on the shelves. So again, I don't want to see any more disrespect of Black romance, because I will be calling y'all out on that. And I don't care if you get your feelings hurt at this point, because you don't care about if those of us who appreciate Black romance have our feelings hurt. So thanks so much for coming to my talk. Like I said, I'm not the only one talking about this. You can follow people. It's a big discussion on Twitter. There are other booktubers discussing this, but I just needed to get this off my chest. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I will check in with you guys soon. Bye!